Hey, what's up guys? It's the Coaster Battleman here, bringing you a new video. It is my top 25 roller coasters I have ridden, August 2018 edition, part 1. And this will be 25th place to 11th place, and then part 2 will be the top 10 coasters I've ever ridden in the top 25, so that will be the introduction, and let's get started with number 25, which is Mystic Timbers. And this is the only GCI wooden coaster on this list. American Thunder just missed the countdown by like a few spots. But Mystic Timbers, it has some pretty cool theming with the shed and everything. And the queue line, there's like a bunch of miniature sheds, but with the ride experience, you have a pretty intense drop as well as some really nice intense turns throughout the ride. Plus, this is a pretty smooth coaster. It's just that the lack of airtime, I don't know what it is, but with the lap bars or the trains, but this coaster has very little airtime, even though I thought this coaster would have some insane ejector airtime. It has kind of disappointed in that category, but it's smooth, intense, and I still really think it's a fun coaster. Number 24 is Wicked Twister at Cedar Point. We're going to be seeing so many Cedar Point coasters on here. They just have so many awesome rides. And Wicked Twisters, I've just grown to love this coaster. Like, the launches are just fantastic. I really like the twisters. They're pretty intense, especially if you're in a front seat or a back seat. You have to be in one of the last two rows or one of the first two rows in order to get the best possible ride experience, because you get the most twists. And Wicked Twister definitely lives up to the name. It's pretty intense, the launches are fantastic, and it's just overall a really fun experience. It's just a little short, and it does have a low capacity. Number 23 is Superman Ride of Steel, and this is at Six Flags America, and this is easily the best coaster at the park. It has a pretty fun drop, some nice airtime hills. It does have some helixes and some straight sections, but I really do love the straight sections. You're just flying straight with the wind in your face. It's a really cool, unique element, in my opinion, out of coasters I've ridden. And the helixes, even though they're kind of long, I still think they're decent elements. And overall, this is a pretty fun coaster, but I recommend to ride in the front for this coaster, especially like front row. You'll get the smoothest possible experience. The more far back you go, the rougher your ride. I rode the back row, it was pretty shaky compared to the front row, but this is still a very fantastic coaster. Definitely has some nice airtime and pretty cool sections as well. Number 22 is Mr. Freeze Reverse Blast, and this is a fun coaster. It has an awesome backwards launch, as well as an inverted top hat, which you don't really find on too many coasters, as well as a vertical spike that you go up. And after that, you go forwards, down the vertical spike, and through the inverted top hat. It's a pretty fun coaster, and despite its shortness, I still think this is the best Premier Rides roller coaster I have ever ridden, and it's definitely a fun ride. I really do enjoy it. Definitely the best coaster at Six Flags St. Louis. Number 21 is Rougarou, and this is the B&M Floorless at Cedar Point, and I have definitely become a big fan of B&M Floorless coasters. They're probably one of my favorite models they make. And this is just a fun coaster. The inversions are fantastic. You have some pretty nice turns throughout the ride. And I really love that first drop, especially if you're in the back seat. You'll get some great airtime, and I recommend, for the smoothest possible ride, to ride in a middle seat, like if not one of the side seats, but like one of the middle seats, to get the best possible experience. And I know back row in a middle seat, you'll get some awesome airtime and a super smooth ride experience on this coaster. And this is just such a great ride. Great duration, great inversions, nice turns as well. Just a fun coaster. Definitely a great refurbishment. Number 20 is Verbolten at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, and I can go in depth with this coaster forever if I wanted to, but I will in a review I'll eventually do in the future. but this coaster has some pretty fantastic launches. You go through an indoor section with some really cool theming, and then you have that iconic drop that used to be where Big Bad Wolf's drop was. It's a nice tribute to the old coaster, and this is just a very fun coaster. Definitely an underrated ride, and I just really enjoy this coaster. Like in 2014 when I rode it, I was kind of, yeah, I didn't really like it that much, but when I came back in 2018, I really enjoyed it. And Verbolten, just such an underrated ride and definitely deserves to be on the list. Number 19 is Steel Hawg, and this coaster, the reason why it's a bit higher than Verbolten is just overall, I've never ridden an SNS El Loco coaster before, and it's one of my favorite models of coaster. Like, this is just such a cool ride. Like, you have these crazy hang time moments throughout the ride on the inversions. You have a great first drop because it's a beyond vertical drop. You have some pretty wonky turns in there, and this is just a fun coaster. Despite its low capacity, I managed to get on this thing like 5 times with like no line, and then the final time I rode it, there was probably like a 45-minute wait. So Steel Hawg, if you go to Indiana Beach, get there super early to ride it, like a bunch of times, and you will not regret it. This is an underrated ride, just really fun. Number 18 is Shivering Timbers, and this is the definition of a coaster that looks like a hyper coaster, but it's a, even though this coaster isn't a hyper coaster, it's kind of like gives that wooden hyper coaster feel with all the massive airtime hills and the insane structure that it has. This coaster has a very fun out and back layout, with the first half being just airtime hill after airtime hill after airtime hill. The second half doesn't give as much airtime, but it's still solid. And then you have a very nice final helix. I know riding this coaster, it wasn't as smooth as most of the other coasters on this list, or even all of them, but I just love the airtime on this thing, and this is just such a fun coaster, no matter what seat I was in. I really enjoyed it. Definitely recommend, if you go to Michigan's Adventure, ride Shivering Timbers a ton of times. Number 17 is Raging Bull, and this is a B&M hypercoaster that I've been riding for a long time now. And this coaster has some solid airtime moments, well, the moments that it has, which is like 3 or 4 moments. But other than that, this coaster is based on mostly like bank turns and helixes. But still, I really do like Raging Bull. This is a super smooth coaster, front row or back row. The airtime that it has is very good. You have a nice tunnel you go through after the first drop into the first bank turn, and this is a super long ride as well. Despite this being the worst B&M hypercoaster I've ridden, it's still such an awesome coaster, fantastic ride at Six Flags Great America. Next on the list is Griffin at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, coming in at the 16th spot. And Griffin, this is just a fun B&M dive coaster, and one of the most picturesque coasters I've ridden, and it's one of the best looking coasters I've ridden. Like, this coaster, it's just a fun ride, and it's a really cool experience. It's super smooth no matter what seat you're in, and you'll be like super duper smooth in the middle row. In the middle seats are like the smoothest possible rides, but it's still super smooth no matter what seat you're in. Like, I've tried this thing on edge seats, middle seats. Like, this is just a fantastic ride. The drop is fantastic. The Immelmans are good. You have a water splashdown, and this coaster, in my opinion, is a lot better than Valraven at Cedar Point because of smoothness, which is one major reason why it's so high on this list, and it's just such a fun coaster. I really enjoy Griffin. Number 15 is Goliath, and this is kind of one of those coasters that's just super short, but it's just such a great ride. Kind of like Griffin, but even better for me, because Goliath, you have an insane first drop, where in the back seat you'll get some awesome airtime. You have some nice airtime hills throughout the ride, and two amazing inversions in a zero-G stall and a dive loop. This coaster, despite having limited elements, definitely lives up to that ride experience. This ride isn't really that long at all, but for what the ride is, this is just such an unbelievable coaster. Super smooth, super strong layout. I just wish it was longer. Number 14 is Dominator at King's Dominion. This is just one of those rides that I flat out enjoy for what it is. And this is just such a fun coaster. You have a very nice first drop, some elite inversions in that vertical loop, and I thought the Cobra roll was pretty fun as well. You have some decent corkscrews in there as well, and some pretty fun bank turns. Dominator, definitely a coaster that not too many people talk about, and I have grown to really become a huge fan of this coaster ever since I've ridden it at King's Dominion. I thought this coaster was going to be solid, but it exceeded my expectations a lot, and I really did enjoy it. Super fun. Dominator is just such a great B&M floorless coaster, and I really hope to get on more B&M floorless coasters even better than this. Number 13 is Intimidator 305, and this is another King's Dominion roller coaster. And you guys may be thinking, why is Intimidator 305 so low? Well, here are the reasons. This coaster is super short, plus there isn't really too much airtime really at all. But other than that, this coaster is just awesome. You have probably the best lift hill on any coaster I've ridden. You have an awesome drop going 90 miles per hour. You have a crazy bank turn right after that first drop where you gray out. And then after that, you go through some intense turns, like Maverick style. Like, it's just such an intense coaster, and it's just so powerful. Like, man, Intimidator 305. Super powerful ride. Really awesome experience. Number 12 is Top Thrill Dragster, and this is the definition of a one-trick ride that's super amazing. And I know Griffin could be in this category as well, but Top Thrill Dragster, you have this insane launch, probably the best launch on any coaster I've ridden. From 0 to 120 miles per hour in 3.8 seconds. Super insane acceleration. You go up a huge tower, up all the way 420 feet in the air, and then you drop back down. It's just such an awesome coaster. You are flying. And just Top Thrill Dragster, finally getting back on it in 2018. It's still just as good as I remember. Super fun ride. It's just so short. But other than that, flawless. Number 11 is Banshee, and this is the final coaster that is not in the top 10 for my top 25. And Banshee, very close to making the top 10, but not quite. This coaster is just such a fun ride. It's really smooth. The inversions are fantastic. The first drop is really good. And it has one of my favorite color schemes on any coaster I've ridden. Possibly even my favorite. You just have that vibrant red track with the blue supports. It's just such a great color scheme. You have two vertical loops, a pretzel loop inversion. With the two inversions combined, you have some other nice inversions in there, and a very nice closing with that final inversion going into the closing helix. This is just such a fun B&M invert. Even though it's not my favorite B&M invert anymore, it's still just such a fantastic coaster. It's not the most intense coaster in the world, but it's still just a great ride. And that was all for part 1. Part 2 will be coming soon with my 10 favorite roller coasters I've ever rode. Thank you guys so much for watching, and stay tuned for more videos.